Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. Today, I'm about to go and do some drone practice because, I have to train to fly in short, kind of very tight spaces and everything as I'm planning my Ukraine trip. But today, so many things have happened that I'm just going to be, like I said in the previous episode, doing additional stuff so that you would be informed about all the news. Don't worry, this is a free for patrons episode. It's all fine. But we have some interesting things to talk about. This probably won't be as long as the previous episodes, but there's just fun events happening out there that I just really wanted to comment on. I'll start with something positive, because Russia tries to show that they're not isolated, that they're kind of still in place in all the sporting competitions. So we had a very strange event happening recently. As you know, Russia was kind of also kicked out not only of other world sports, but of basketball as well. And Russia, also in its desires to show that it wasn't isolated, decided to do an international basketball tournament in the city of Perm. The participants is the whole Russian national team, the Venezuelan national team, the Colombian national team, and the local Perm club Parma. And yesterday, Parma, to the delight of the Russians, trashed the Colombian team 155-53, like with over 100 points of difference. But it was found out later, like the very next day, the Colombia team is not real, because the Colombian Basketball Federation reported that it had not received any invitations from Russia and had not sent the country's team anywhere. So it is now completely unknown who is even there in Perm representing this mystery Colombia team. However, the most stunning thing is about how they don't care, because, for one, they had their own friendship games where in a bunch of events only one athlete participated, but they decided for their own PR to basically declare that the tournament will continue. It's like they have a fake Colombian team that no one knows who they are, but it's okay to continue the tournament. Amazing. Yeah, but also before we get to the main subject, I was fixed. I was told that I made a mistake in the last episode. It's Lake of Como, not Komi. Sorry, it's Lake of Como, and the whole place is like Lake of Como. All this stuff, and my Italian listeners made sure that I know that. So it is what it is. Oh, and also I made slight errors in the Soviet joke, but it's fine. These entry parts aren't as scripted. But the main thing why I wanted to do this episode today is the fact that Telegram founder Pavel Durov was arrested. Now, he's arrested for the typical stuff why people use Telegram all over the place. I mean, you guys know my ties and how much I know about some shadier parts because of my profession and everything, and I've been in touch with them. And while in Russia, Telegram is the main social network because it's anonymous, and if you look up any Russian city name in Telegram, you'll find out local groups which tell you about events planned and where you can eat cheaply and all this fun stuff. In Russia, it's a normal social network, okay? And everywhere else outside of Russia in Europe, in Latvia as well, Telegram is full with channels where you can just order escort girls, buy insane amounts of drugs if you want, buy guns, organize acts of terror, all that stuff. And the French got tired of this because, Pavel Durov was not cooperating with the authorities, and so they arrested him. And now they have a whole list of things that they want to persecute him for. And apparently he's being threatened with 20 years in prison. So that's interesting, but and it's understandable. And Russians are just confused because that's for them, Telegram is kind of like Facebook. They use it for common communication, and it's also been used by a lot of the opposition people and a lot of Russian propaganda. It's like everyone has a Telegram channel. Meanwhile, in the West, Telegram is kind of a dirtier thing, kind of a more shadier situation, and they don't. And the thing is that. There's another situation here with the whole Russian situation, why they are panicking and why I made this episode. Because commenting on the arrest of the Telegram founder Durov, the Z authors draw attention to the main aspect why they're all panicking. See, in the absence of any special military communications, even including their Kartapolov law that prohibited gadgets, it is through Telegram that the Russian troops are being controlled. Really, it's like they use Telegram most of all because, it's in Russian and everything, and it's just insane. And one of the things that they joked about this is that one of the first posts was the fact that French police arrested the chief in communications of the Russian armed forces. But there are many, many comments on this that really shows why this is so impactful there. Andrei Medvedev writes, quote, Durov's detention in itself may not have caused the resonance in Russia if it were not for one circumstance. In fact, this is the main messenger of the current war. It's an alternative to closed military communication. Probably from today, the issue of creating a military messenger for our army becomes vital, because how long Telegram will remain as we know it, and whether such a messenger will remain at all, it is now difficult to predict. Ribar writes, Telegram at the moment has become almost the main means of controlling units in the zone of the strategic defense forces, and on both sides of the front. A secret only for some people in the main directorate of communications. It will be very sad and funny at the same time if it's Pavel Durov's arrest that will be the catalyst for changes in approaches to means of communication and control in the Russian armed forces. And now the problems of a purely military nature have accumulated over 2 years, which the specialized department, for some reason, preferred to turn the blind eye to. And then of course, a patron said that I should quote more of the 13 guy who's known by swearing a lot, and he's like the criminal dude. And he, of course, also wrote about this. As long as the card does not go, and in the end we are now going to take away the only more or less normal communication, FCO, HUID, Kremlin, MOD, I don't know who, all fucking hell, alert, New Kiev. At random, of course. This is just great. Then there was like audio files where he was like screaming that this is direct declaration of war against Russia and all this stuff, because again, their communications are just borked. Military informant writes, considering what role Telegram plays in troop management and not parade and exhibition like walking around the parade, then gaining access to correspondence by Western intelligence services could surely mean gaining access to information sensitive to the Russian armed forces as well. With all the consequences of this, what can we do? This is the modern army. We don't go into an attack without the Telegram and Discord. And Delyagin special, he's a very reactionary economist, this Delyagin guy. And he's like, he's not a communist per se, except that he's anti-libertarian to the point of insanity. And that goes beyond being a communist, even in his beliefs. It's a very weird channel. But he writes this, quote, the kidnapping of Pavel Durov by French terrorists for refusing to cooperate with French intelligence services is a clear part of the Western war against Russians and Russia, and another demonstration of the insignificance of the Russian bureaucracy, which expels talents from the country. Let me remind you, Durov also created Kontakte and then magically lost it. That was taken away by Kremlin because Kremlin really hates innovative people and cannot even think about protecting them outside its borders. A number of reports say that Telegram is the main communication tool for our army. They failed to deprive our army of communication by the hands of Kartapolovs and United Russia in general. Now they are doing it by the hands of the French. And in this case, I would like to say thank you to the French people. And I just hope the blocking of Telegram will be such that these Zvezvatniks who post there constantly, that I can still read them somehow. I think I'm going to have to register on Kontakte or something with a fake name if this continues, because I still need to make my episodes after all. Alexei Sukonkin writes, in connection with Durov's detention, there are a lot of problems that must be solved immediately, because Telegram is now, no matter what Gurulev or Kartapolov tell you, the basis of military communication. Telegram is a powerful alternative to the official means of communication and, of course, more timely information resource. Telegram is the main civilian messenger in Russia, virtually uncontrolled by Western intelligence agencies, as well as the most powerful advertising resource and a platform for personal blogs. From now on, all of this is under threat. Isn't this the main tragedy of August? In the near future, more information will become available, and then we'll decide what to do. And like I said at the beginning of this part, PNV Beyond the Format writes, quote, in fact, the chief of communications of the Russian armed forces, has been detained. Now, there are also other, of course, problems carrying on with the Russian army. For example, the Cat News channel writes about another problem. See, the Russian military is now tired of fighting and wants to go home. Quote, the last 3 days, somehow it so happened that we discuss with different brothers the problem of extreme fucked upness of those of our acquaintances who left on mobilization as volunteers. I.e., we are talking about those who are not on the lists, but in October 22nd they went to the front themselves, who were called by the call of their hearts and who were just out of their wits and held a mobilization order in the military ticket. Suddenly, there were a lot of such people among our charges and among the brotherly channels, only those of whom I know personally, 6 people, and if we take internet acquaintances, even more. And it was these people exactly now who began not only to declare their fucked upness, but also to look for options to leave the special military operations zone. Even at the most fierce moments of the 23rd, even during the intense assaults on Avdiivka, and there were a lot of unsightly things going on there at the first stage, there was no such thing. And I do not condemn them in any way because I am not writing this post from a dugout, but this is a very bad call for all of us. I repeat, this is a very bad call because the possibilities of continuing the special military operation without drastic socio-economic shocks are not unlimited, to put it mildly. So, everyone wants just to go home because, after all, they went there for free. And now there's a bunch of people fighting for millions of rubles, which is, like I said, not good for the morale. And this is dire because another author, and this whole thing ties together, of course, another author who was a mobilized person himself of the channel Vault 8, like I said, he must be a Fallout fan, but I feel ashamed that this is happening. Someone should write to Obsidian or Bethesda. I mean, they're all under Microsoft now, and point that their Vault 8 from the Vault City from the original Fallout series is now used this way. But he again reminds about the main problems that the Russian army is facing in this third year of the war. No men and no equipment. And in the author's opinion, no steps to resolve these problems are being undertaken by the command. And this ties in together with the fact how people now are trying to leave the army. Quote, reliance is placed on entrenched groups of servicemen, each of which is recruited only once. The remnants of regulars, the melting first wave of mobics, that's the mobilized, short-term volunteers dissolving in battles, and new contrabasses, that's how he calls people who have signed contracts with the Russian army, who found themselves ditched only recently, auto-renewal of contracts until the end of special military operation, instead of, mama, I swear, 1 year and that's it. All of these groups are depleted due to poor training and high waste of personnel from October 2023 to now in our offensive. At this point, the army is self-depleting by shoveling out full-time contract personnel from non-infantry branches of the military, like the strategic missile forces, the air force, and so on. At the moment, there's a growing shortage of personnel, which prevents strategic operations from being carried out without heavy losses. The main stocks of armored vehicles have been lost. Here, thanks, and I honestly wholeheartedly can say thanks, first of all, to the abandonment of equipment in February-March 2022, then in September 2022. But the real graveyard of scrap metal was the Avdiivka operation. At the moment, motorized regiments are rather motorized on vehicles with a small reinforcement from the remnants of BMPs and tanks. Well, BMP is just an infantry fighting vehicle, just saying. I automatically abbreviate the Russian things together, and then I remind myself that I should probably use English language terms for this. The reason for the prayob, that is of fuckery, is that the Ukrainian advantage in FPV drones, which I'm going to practice today, and multicopters, and the lack of provision of onboard REB, radioelektronная борьба, like anti-drone systems, for October-December 2023, when they suffer the heaviest losses. This makes possible strategic operations very low speed, the speed of advancing infantrymen on foot. The problem of Ukrainian superiority in, as they call it, small aviation, those are the FPV drones, has not been solved. It's already known. It closes off the possibility of breaking the front in large areas. In 2022, the stockpiles of artillery shells and mines that allowed for strategic operations were spent. Only now, in the summer of 2024, ammunition stocks of all calibers are slowly creeping up, as well as daily spending limits, which are becoming more generous. All of 2023, winter and spring of 2024, were defended and attacked on the deficit, except for Zaporizhia and Avdiivka directions. The picture that emerges is that every problem, the upper staff cannot put everything together. During mobilization, people appeared and armored vehicles were replenished, but there were no shells. Now there are shells, but there's an acute shortage of armored vehicles and a serious shortage of people. Because of this, strategic ground operations are not yet available. Plus, the real level of competence of the top and middle command staff allows for successful offensive operations of one regiment out of 3 in a division or 1 brigade in a general army. And, well, this whole thing is very valuable because Volt 8 is a guy who actually kind of wants to go home. He's still very patriotic and a very macho-vatnik, but still, he actually wants to go home. So, when he writes about his own issues, he really, really means it. But another interesting thing why this episode is out is, well, because my birthday is coming very soon. But if you remember, the first time I actually, met Evitas' parents and friends was on the day when Prigozhin made his advance towards Moscow. And then, well, he was killed some months on, which is interesting because on the day of his death, as really those Prigozhin's massive events were one of the busiest time of work in this show. And I spent like the whole day posting, murderer of Prigozhin and Utkin, murderers of Prigozhin and Utkin should go to jail on like the comments of these Telegram channels. And it was amazing because they didn't know how to respond because they can't openly just admit that Putin should be jailed because that goes against their whole situation, against their whole propaganda means. But yeah, the whole situation as Prigozhin's channel was as Prigozhin's death and everything he wrote was important for my work. I kind of wanted to check on everything and see the anniversary of the murder of Prigozhin and Utkin was marked with a parade of how I like to call it collective impotence. Z authors wrote hundreds of texts about what a great patriot the late Prigozhin was, how he was a brave warrior, a real fighter for the truth, and a truly historical character. But none of them at all, wrote what happened to him, why he was. Who killed Prigozhin and Utkin? It's not clear. They must have gotten, forgetful and sick. But we know that happens. Among other things, these texts answer a question that many people are concerned about. Do these angry patriots, like Mikhail Kalashnikovs and all these other idiots, pose any threat to the Kremlin? Supporters of the war who are dissatisfied with how softly they think the special military operation, as they call it, is being carried out and who dream of seeing Russian tanks at least in Lisbon? And the answer is no, they don't. Not only they're unable to defend their rights, not only they're unable to stand up for their idiotic idols under Turchins, they're even afraid to write text in Telegram. And that's just insane. And I want to quote Rosgvardeyets in a bit of a lengthy post so that I could show you at least a single example of all this mess. There were a lot of posts and I really didn't want to go through all of them. But prepare for some glorious Prigozhin glorification, but it's also utterly toothless with no mentions of, how Putin killed them. Quote, a year has passed since the death of Prigozhin and Utkin, who were the leaders of PMC Wagner. A year ago, I wrote that this moment will be the beginning of the end, realizing that such strong and charismatic leaders cannot be replaced. Although in my heart, I hoped that the company would continue to exist in same form, but the subsequent disagreements between the commanders and the desire to destroy any legacy of the Wagner Group on the part of some influential people put an end to it. The company disintegrated into many splinters, while maintaining its presence in the African continent and becoming the modern Wagner Group. Yes, it can be called the same Wagner, but the fact remains that the backbone of the company disintegrated. A year later, we all saw what Yevgeny Viktorovich was talking about, especially about corruption in the Ministry of Defense, as well as our weaknesses, as shown, for example, by the current situation in the Kursk region. This is what Prigozhin repeatedly spoke about, suggesting to engage in territorial defense forces, understanding the capabilities of the enemy. High-profile arrests that follow one after another among the top commanders of the Defense Ministry speak for themselves about corruption. A year later, we see that the system of recruiting convicts for war, which was first used by Prigozhin, is working. Of course, the conditions are quite different, but nevertheless, the first experience was carried out by him. A year later, we lack the strength and motivation of Wagner to solve our problems. I'm not belittling the work that our soldiers and volunteers do every day, but from many I heard and continue to hear that there is not enough of Wagner Group and that many people would like to work there because they had the main thing, the desire to fight and win. which I'll return to later. A year later, despite the desire of many to destroy the memory of Prigozhin and Wagner Group, we hear about references to those who were associated with the company. We hear how some units from the company returned to the front and continue to destroy the enemy under the auspices of other units, but at the same time remembering and honoring the memory of the company. This is probably one of the most important indicators of how strong PMC Wagner was. A year later, ordinary people say how much they miss the leader who was Yevgeny Prigozhin and continue to carry flowers to his grave. And now, a year later, I clearly see that the country has lost a strong steel fist capable of smashing Bakhmut and fisting yourselves and using a huge sledgehammer, but that's a different story. But many people continue to use the glory and memory for the benefit of Russia and the victory. A crisis that they did not want to solve turned into a tragedy that can no longer to be fixed. And here is the best part why I chose this one, because he finishes with some very interesting quotes. I want to finish this post, which is a tribute to memory, with phrases that have truly become popular in the war and which were given to us by Yevgeny Viktorovich. And here comes the best part. We will all go to hell, but in hell we will be the best. And it's better to die a hero than to live as a faggot. Yes, that's Rosgordiet for you. It's just crazy. But about willingness to win. I mean, he's not wrong there that current Russian forces really don't have any actually moral desire to win. It's kind of like, they're kind of like those athletes in professional sports teams who just are there to cash in the paycheck and they really don't care if the team wins or loses, basically. This is just crazy. Because there's a nice little comment by another Z channel that goes like this about this, which explains the situation better. Even in movies about bandit, it is quite clear. Victory and results are for those who actually fight. Those who just work are potential losers. You can call our actions anything you want. Special military operation, counter-terrorist operation, a giant trash heap on fire. That's my addition. We need to change the essence of the attitude of the leadership to this case. The Ukrainians are fighting. They are really fighting. We are not fighting, but conducting a special military operation. Isn't it time for us to start a war too, or we'll lose? It's a classic. If you really fight, you will achieve victory. That's Slotskov plus. But, I mean, who wants to fight when the attitude towards some people is just a bit crazy? As the author of the Z channel Voyevoda Broadcasts suggests, exemplary punishment of conscripts released from captivity, as there was this exchange of 115 Ukrainians for 115 Russians. But it didn't go so well. And he writes this, quote, I will say unpopular things. I really hope that conscripts will now go as witnesses in criminal cases about how the border was blown. They will tell the military investigation who taught them and how, who is standing next to them, and so on. When the entire company surrendered without a fight, having been in fancy trenches, I'm only disgusted by it. And I wish that those who surrendered without battle will be incarcerated. Just amazing. But in the end, I have to do a bit of shilling here. Again, Patreon stuff, please, if you can, support the show, patreon.com/theeasternborder. And there's apparently weirdness with the Apple iTunes thing. If you want to become a patron, do not do it through the iOS, because apparently there's a weird mix-up with Patreon. I might not have to change everything from there, so that's fine. However, there's going to be an extra 30% thing. If you want to sign up to the Patreon, do it through the homepage. If you do it through the iOS app, they're going to start charging more money because Apple's greedy. So just go to patreon.com/theeasternborder and please support the show, or go to theeasternborder.lv. You can check a link. You can click the link to our merch store. You can just click the donate button. Anyway, support the show. And there, shilling over. I'm really quick this time. Oh yeah, this episode, of course, free for patrons. Let me just remind you. But you know, there's a village, small town called New York, in Ukraine. Yes. Ukrainians have weird city names. I mean, we have a small town in Latvia called Cēsis. It's one of the oldest towns, and it's in the region of Latvia that we call Middle Earth, like Midlands in a way. But the thing is that over there in Cēsis we have two districts. One of them is Florida, the other is California. They were just added to the city with the investment of our Latvian diaspora, so they got named that way. And I don't exactly know whether there's a small town called New York in Ukraine, but it exists. And some people have commented on this because after huge fights, it's not yet completely taken over, but it's close to that because Ukrainians are retreating from that part. But the Z channels, they just embrace the fact that they're orcs. And I have heard statements of if you were born an orc, defend Mordor and all this nonsense, and they just don't even understand what that means. But Blue Zedbeard wants to kind of immortalize of the feat of the Russian soldier in this following post, with which I'll end the episode. And he says, "It would be beautiful to rename New York to New Orc." And they truly are. They are orcs, and they even call themselves that, which is just beautiful. And okay, that's it for today. I'll be back with more news when important stuff happens. For now, до свидания, товарищи. And always remember, happiness is mandatory.